Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode here on the Sitrep podcast. I'm your host, Ariskini Jim, and in today's episode, we are going to be building an Abrams battle tank out of the Abrams Tank Platoon box set from Battlefront for their Team Yankee in 15mm. So let's go ahead and open up this box and see what we have. Alright, so inside the box we have all of our sprues, obviously, and ooh, check this out. You don't actually usually get instructions with a Battlefront kit, so cool. This is actually really awesome. We got detailed instructions for 3 different variants of the tank that we can build. Awesome, we will definitely be referring to those. Now over here we've got a total of 10 sprues. There are 5 tanks in the box, so quite obviously we're going to wind up with 2 sprues per vehicle. Cool, there they are. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grab one of each sprue set and build one of these tanks here on camera. So obviously the first thing we're going to do is start cutting our pieces out of the sprue. Here we go. Alright, so here we have all of the pieces cut out of the sprue and cleaned up, as best we can on our first go. So there's quite a few parts in here, almost as much as, say, a Plastic Soldier Company kit. Now, there's a lot of parts in here for different versions of the tank, so we're going to go through these and talk about what we have. Clearly, we have 1, 2, 3 parts of the hull. That's pretty straightforward. That's going to be the same for any of the 3 versions of the tank that you're putting together. We have our track assemblies, and we have our side skirts. Now our side skirts are a little tricky, and we'll go over the details when we come to that part of the tank. So let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, obviously we have the turret, the sides and the front, along with the bottom, no worries there. We have a pin in case you don't want to magnetize your models. We've got a turret bustle in some versions of the tank. Again, it's going to depend on which version of the tank you want to build. Here's a pretty interesting feature. This is the ammo blowout pounds. So how this works in the actual M1 tank is it's a safety feature to safeguard the crew from the absolute worst of an ammunition explosion. So the ammunition of the M1 is stored in the back part of the turret here, this little turret bustle that you see here, behind sliding armored doors that only open up when the loader is actually loading a new round into the weapon. So the way it works is those ammo blowout panels are made to explode out first. So if, God forbid, you actually take a round into the ammunition, you have an ammunition fire and that explosion goes off, there's a halon extinguisher system in there that slows down the explosion just enough. What happens is the explosion is vented out of the roof through those blowout panels, and at least in theory, mitigates the damage that the crew itself is going to take. Obviously, the tank itself is still a wreck, but hopefully the crew has a better chance of survival in the event of that catastrophic ammo explosion. We've also got 2 different options here for the side turrets stowage. The short one is for the M1, the longer ones are for more recent versions of the M1. We have different hatch assemblies, whether or not you want to be a commander's vehicle, or do you want the hatch to be open or closed, pretty much. We have a gun mantlet. This is where the gun actually fits into the front of the turret. So let's talk about some of the components that we won't be using. Definitely won't be using these shorter Stowagemens, and we definitely won't be using these particular back pieces of the side skirts. These go to older versions of the M1 that I don't really want to build. So on earlier versions of the M1, these pieces would go right about here, you see here. The Army found out relatively quickly that this did not work. Too much mud and gunk would get built up behind that. So later versions of the M1, like the M1A1, would then see this smaller piece. And this is what we're going to be using for our later versions of the M1. And then we got lots of armament options, tons of armament options. We've got 2 M2 50 caliber machine. Oh, I'm sorry, those are the M240 machine guns. Sorry about that. Those are the smaller 30 caliber M240 machine guns. And then we've got two of the larger M2 50 caliber or Maudus machine guns that you can also put on the top of your turret when we come to that part. Probably the most important single decision you're going to make when you're building this tank is whether or not to put the old 105mm rifle or the 120mm smoothbore gun on there. And again, that's the biggest single difference between the M1 and the M1A1. So when the M1 comes out first, it has the M68 Rifle, which is pretty much the British L7, 105mm rifle. This is what's in Team Yankee, the novel. So if you're going strictly by the novel, that's the gun to use. However, historically, these were almost immediately replaced by a larger, much more powerful German-designed RH-120 smoothbore. This is what you see in Desert Storm. This is what you see in Iraqi Freedom. This is probably what I'm going to be using for my model kit. So we're going to get rid of the parts that we're probably not going to use. Of course, we also have plenty of stowage options, a small radio assembly there on the back. And yeah, those are pretty much the parts that we're going to use for today's model build. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and build the hull. So the first thing we're going to do is glue the track and wheel assemblies onto the side of the hull. No worries there. Obviously, use those grooves to make sure that you don't wind up gluing your tracks on backwards or anything like that. Always dry fit first. I'm going to go ahead and apply some glue. And again, assuming you have your pieces dry fitted, and assuming you, oh, hold on a minute, a little bit extra glue there. Assuming you have your pieces dry fitted properly and properly cleaned, you know, scraped off of any excess plastics from the sprue, it fits in there, you know, smooth as butter. No worries there. We're going to go ahead and do the same on the other side. Very nice. Almost like it's meant to. Of course, you do the quick squash test just to kind of make sure that your tank is going to sit level on your playing surface. That's the beginning of your hull there, put together already. Okay, the next part we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put on our hull deck right there on top. It goes right on top like that, along with the back of our hull right there. I suggest you do the whole back first, and I'll explain why in just a second. So the whole back fits right there between those two studs. Put a little bit of glue in there. Again, make sure you dry fit first. And it fits in there just like that. Now what you're looking for here is a very smooth line between the underside and the backside of your turret, of your whole back, just like that. And the reason you want to do the back part first is because it sort of governs and informs how far back your hull deck is going to sit on top of your hull bottom and track assemblies. Because there's not really a guide there or a peg or a groove or anything like that to sort of help you out with that. At least here you've got 2 points of reference. You've got the back of the engine deck, and it's got a match up right there with the front of your glacis plate. So you'll see what I mean here in just a second. A little bit of extra glue there, get rid of that. Alright, so like I said, it's got to tap up against the front of your engine back there, like we see there in the video. And we also, come on, get in there. It's being a little stubborn. Okay, cool. So we have a nice clean join there between the engine back, the whole back there, and the top of your engine deck, and also at the front, near the front of the glacis plate, sort of the nose of the tank. And there you go. That's pretty much the hull basically assembled. Alright, next we're going to do the side skirts on here. Now, these are a little tricky. I want to go over a few things here. The good thing is they have these little pegs, these little pins that you can use that guide exactly where the side skirts are supposed to go. Because it's a little tricky, but again, you've got those pins to help you out here. Those pins are supposed to fit right there in those little wells that we see. So, again, it doesn't take much glue because these pieces are pretty finely fitted. All in all, it's a very, well-made kit, to be honest. Now, the reason those pins are so important is because the side skirt fits on the side of the Abrams hull in kind of a weird way. And you'll see what I mean as soon as this part finally steps into place. Oh, there we go. I was going to say. Alright, she's being a little stubborn here. I swear to God, I did dry fit this. Come on. Give me just a second here, guys. Okay, there we go. Sweet. So it's finally in place. Now, clearly, it's not supposed to extend all the way over the back. And we've gone over that. Here's the other one. You're going to see a tiny sliver of space, a little bit of daylight there between the bottom of the fender and the top of the side skirt. It's going to look like a mistake. It isn't. That's exactly what the M1 looks like in real life. It's a weird feature of the tank. I don't know why they designed it that way. But the model does do it right, and that's an expected result. It's going to look weird, but I promise you it's correct. Now this is a little bit of a tough part here where we have to put that last part of the side skirt in. And again, here's where you have two different options. The full back plate there only goes on the M1. On the improved M1 or on the M1A1, you want to use the smaller one that we see here. So there they are, both in place. The whole hull has now been constructed and we're ready for the next stage. Okay, so moving on to the turret. Now this is two parts. Before you put them together, you definitely want to have them cleaned really well and dry fitted so that you know exactly how they're going to fit together before you try to squeeze them together. A quick word of advice: the bottom part of this turret fits in completely on the inside of the turret walls. None of it sits on the bottom. So again, you want to make sure that it's dry fitted and cleaned off really well so that you get a nice smooth finish. Now I'm going to go ahead and put in the gun mantlet. This is where the gun actually connects into the turret. Now, it might be a slightly confusing which way it goes in there. Okay, the little piece of plastic that is sort of extending out there, that's the coaxial machine gun. That's a 30 caliber machine gun, usually an M240 or some such. It is operated by the gunner, and there's the gunner's sights. So long story short, that little protrusion there is supposed to go on the right side of the turret. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to put the gun into the mantlet. Now again, the first big choice you have here is, again, which gun to put in there. If you're sticking to the Team Yankee novel, you use the smaller 105mm. If you're going by actual combat and actual history where the M1 has seen service, you go with a larger 120mm gun. So it was used in more wars, Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom. I personally would go with the 120, but that's a choice up to you. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to fit that into the mantlet here. Now there is sort of a half peg on the end of the gun, so the gun can only fit into the mantlet a certain way. Make sure that when you fit the gun in there, the gun's battle sight is on the top of the barrel. This is another way you can make sure you put the mantlet in there correctly. And again, that mantlet is going to be put in there with the coaxial machine gun on the right hand side. So between the coaxial machine gun on the right hand side and the gun sight, you see that little knob on the top of the muzzle there? Make sure that goes on the top. Either way, you're going to be doubly sure that you're putting the gun mantlet in there the right way. And the reason I wanted to put the gun in there first, again, not only for that extra confirmation, but I want to make sure that the gun is level. So there we go. The turret is more or less assembled, and we're ready for the next step. Alright, so next we're going to go ahead and put the pin into the pin well. Again, it's kind of an optional step. It's whether or not you want to magnetize your models. I always choose not to magnetize because the pin works fine, trust me, especially once you put some paint on the model. So it fits in there super easy. Now there is a little bit of space in there, so one thing you definitely want to make sure you get is that the pin there is in the exact center of the well. And you also want to make sure that once it's set in there, do not put the turret onto your hull, because if there's any splash glue, if there's any excess glue there, it's going to glue your turret and your hull together. You don't want that. Now we come to one part of the model I actually did not like, I'm not going to lie, are these Stowagemens. These are really fiddly pieces. I did finally get them together, but it was a bit of a struggle. I might be missing a bit of a secret there, but anyway, that's where I am. So the first decision you have to make here is, again, which size side bustle you want to put in there. Remember, the M1 in the novel does not have the back bustle at all, and only the short bustles on the side. Whether you want to build the improved M1 or the M1A1 means you're going to use the longer side bustle, and of course that connects to the back bustle. It's up to your preference. Just make sure that you use the options in the instructions so you don't wind up with the wrong bustle, the wrong side stowage, and the wrong gun. All that has to match together for accuracy. So I chose to put the side stowage bins or the side stowage racks and attach them to the back bustle first. This way the whole thing can kind of fit on there at once. There is a little bit of bend to it, so just be really careful here. You can close that gap there between the back of the stowage bin and the back of the turret. Or I should say the front of the stowage bin and the back of the turret. And the reason I wanted to do it this way is because it's very difficult to tell how far forward or how far back to slide those side stowage racks. There's no guide or pin or mark or anything like that. This way, if you pre-attach them to that back bustle, it fits on there pretty well. So I finally did get all these bustles put on there, the back bustle and the two side kits, the two side racks. I'm not gonna lie, I was not a fan of this part of the kit. It took me a couple of tries. There was a little bit of extra glue there, as I'm sure you can see. Again, I might be missing a secret somewhere, but it was a rough part of the model. The good point is, or the good news is, if you have any screw-ups or any extra glue, hey, throw in some stowage, and you'll be fine. It'll cover up the mess. Okay, the next piece that we're going to put on is going to be the commander's hatch, and I apologize, the camera's a little out of focus here. What might be a little confusing is how to put the commander's hatch in here. It's pretty easy to tell. Go by this general rule. In general, Western battle tanks, the hatch opens up behind the gunner or the loader. So it opens up like this. It opens up backwards, unlike a Warsaw Pact battle tank. Also, in the front of the hatch is a small well there that you use to mount your secondary armament, either your 30 caliber or your 50 caliber machine gun, and that clearly has to go to the front. So between those two clues, it's pretty easy to make sure that your commander's hatch is fitted in there the correct way. Alright, so next up are the ammunition blowout doors. We discussed the function of these before. In the model kit, it's actually one of the easiest parts to put together. The only secret here is that you have to make damn sure it is well cleaned, because it fits in there very snugly. So if there's any excess plastic on it, it's going to be a hassle. But if you got it properly cleaned and dry fitted, fits in there nice and smooth, probably the easiest part of the model. So now it's time for some secondary weapon options. Again, the kit gives you two 50 calibers and two 30 caliber machine guns. There they are. And there's only two wells or two pivot points that you mount these weapons on. So they give you 4 weapons. That way you can choose whether you have a 50 on the commander's hatch and a 30 on the loader's hatch, vice versa, 2 50s, 2 30s. It literally gives you whatever options you want, and the rest goes in your bits box. Speaking of bits box, I went ahead and rated my bits box, and just to see what else I have here. Extra 50s I won't use, old school 30 calibers from World War II I won't use. I will not use the tow missile, because that would not be right. I do have M60s from some Marine Corps kits, so if you want to make a Marine M1, maybe you can do that. How about this? How about we put a 20mm automatic cannon on the top there from an old VOD kit? That'll really piss off the rivet counters, because that doesn't make sense at all. But in all seriousness, one thing I am going to use on is my bits box does have some Mark 19 40mm automatic grenade launchers. People did mount Mark 19s onto their M1 battle tanks. There's footage all over the Iraqi war that prove that. So I'm going to put a Mark 19 on the loader's hatch and a Maul Deuce 50 cal on the commander's hatch. So again, it depends on what options you want to use. You have plenty of choices here. This is what I'm going with. Okay, so here are the secondary weapons complete and put onto the tank. And you know what? One part that I did forget is you have to glue that small cover on there, on the loader side of the turret. Just do yourself a favor and make sure that you put that small round cover in place before you put in your loader's secondary armament. That's Not a huge deal. I made that mistake here, but I got away with it. It's just a little easier to put that in place when the loader's secondary weapon is not in your way. So here we go with the turret mostly built. As you can see, I just tossed some stowage in there. I went ahead and I put the spare road wheel here on the side of the bustle. The directions don't say to do that, but I've seen plenty of photos and plenty of video. And yeah, I just know that a lot of Abrams crews tend to do that. They put that spare road wheel on the side of the bustle. It also kind of helps to cover up some mistakes you might have had putting that pain in the ass bustle together. Not gonna lie, 100% honesty there. On top of that, I went ahead and put on these small details on the sides of the turret. They almost look like little boxes there. I won't lie, I don't really know what those are in real life. But that's pretty much ready to go. That turret's ready to go. The last thing we're going to do is tap on, I think it's a small radio antenna. Try and get that in focus there. Okay, it didn't really get in focus. It goes on this small stud back here. Actually, I'm not going to go on record and say for sure that's a radio antenna. Again, that's another part I don't really know what that was. When I was in the service, I was still in the Marine Corps, we were still using the M60, so I'm not firsthand terribly familiar with the M1, I won't lie to you. So that's how it fits on there, and that's pretty much it. The turret is built, the hull is built. We're sure that the glue on our turret pin has now dried, and that's our first Abrams built and ready for priming. Alright, so here she is ready to go. Here's my poor man's turntable. Yeah, just a quick turn on the catwalk there, girl. Show off what you got. How good is the kit? The kit's amazing once you get it put together. The only part I didn't like, again, I keep harping on it, is that bustle fitting into the side turret stowage cages. Not a fan of that. Was a huge fan of the side skirts. Those really worked well. Definitely like that. Love the guide points on those. Everything else went together, you know, smooth as butter. The only part, again, I had a little bit of problem with was that bustle. Got through it, sort of covered up with a little bit of mistakes I made with the stowage. But all in all, it's not bad. Once she's put together, she's good to go. Compared against some of her contemporaries, here's a Leopard 2, an early model Leopard 2, also from Battlefront. Also, you know, also a very large Western-style battle tank. That's, again, one of the older ones without the modular armor. Oh no, I knocked my tank over. Okay, here's her big adversary. Now, these T-80s aren't completely painted yet. I'm still working on these. But that's the matchup for the ages. That's pretty much what everyone was expecting in the 1980s. M1A1 battle tanks versus T-80s, especially in the later part of the 1980s, early 1990s. Of course, it never happened, thank God. But there we go. Ironically, a lot of the T-80s that we see nowadays are with a friendly power in Ukraine. They're technically different variants of the T-80s. The reactive armor doesn't quite look like that. And of course, we have what the M1 replaced. We have the M68A1 that I built for my Desert Storm Force. Now, this is also a Battlefront kit. However, these reactive armor panels, these ERA panels, do not come with the kit. I had to build those myself and put them onto the tank in order to bring these M60s, I think they were from the Ryan's Leatherneck box, up to the 1991 Operation Desert Storm settings of January, February 1991. But that's pretty much the build for our M1A1 Abrams. Again, I'm going for a Desert Storm or Iraqi Freedom kind of a look there. So what else came in the box here? Let's... Oof! I just crashed something. Hold on. Okay, so we got some cards. And you do obviously need the cards to play the game. And taking the cards out of the box, I smashed the turret off my Marine Corps tank. However, come on, get back on there. There we go. The Marine Corps tank is undamaged, even getting clobbered over the head by a full bag of nasty Army cards. Army, you failed to destroy the Marines. Draw your own conclusions, gentlemen. And in all seriousness, what we also got in the box was our usual commanders. In case you want to build these as commander tanks in open turrets. Or I should say open commander's hatches. There is one more part I do want to go over. It's an optional part. It comes with the commanders there. Let me see if I can get that out of the plastic. Give me Just a second here. Okay, so this little piece is optional, and it only is applicable to later versions of the M1A1. So the M1 is the type of the tank. Obviously, the variant is the M1A1, and then there are, of course, all kinds of sub-variants after that. This piece goes onto the back of the hull here, but only if the tank you're trying to build is, let's see here, the M1A1 HC. This is a later version of the M1A1, probably a little bit before the M1A2 or the M1A2 Sep 3, Sep 4, the C's and the D's, the stuff that you see nowadays. But that's where it goes. It's an extra edition that only goes on the back of the tank. I would only use those if you're doing like late Iraqi freedom kind of stuff. I'm not going to be using it because that's for a much more modern variant of the M1 that I'm not going to be trying to replicate. I'm probably going to be sticking with 1991-2003 Desert Storm Operation Iraqi Freedom. So it's going to be in desert sand probably. It's going to wind up looking a lot like that M60 back there as opposed to a NATO World War III woodland kind of thing that never happened, obviously. So that's going to wrap up our video, everybody. This is Oriskany Jim with the Sitrep Podcast. Thanks very much as always, and Tango Mike for listening.